and welcome to Eye on Oakland. I'm Chuck Moss, your host. We've got a great guest. We're going to jump right into the show. We have Crystal Proxmire, who is the editor and publisher of the Oakland County Times. Welcome back to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so what is the Oakland County Times?
So we're an online news site, and we cover local news, local politics, events, anything that's going on in communities, all the way across Oakland County, from Hazel Park to Holly, from South Lyon, all the way up to Ortonville. We're trying to cover everybody.
That's a big beat, but someone's got to do it. It's not like print media is doing it anymore. So I'm glad. How would someone access Oakland County Times?
So oaklandcountytimes.com is the website. We also, have a Facebook page, and we're on Twitter as well.
We can put that up on the screen, by the way, Oakland County Times, which would be good. Anybody wants to take a look. And you've got some very good news yourself as the subject, not the coverer. You received an honor, the Oakland County Bar Association's Liberty Bell Award. What's that?
Yeah, so that is, the Bar Association honors attorneys every year, but they also honor one non-attorney person, and they picked me for doing over 800 candidate interviews. We do little videos, sort of like we're doing here, except for anybody that's running for office, anything from library boards and school boards, all the way up to congressional candidates and presidential candidates. I've been able to interview over the past about 5 years, and we've done over 800 of them. And so it was a real honor to be able to get the Liberty Bell Award for that.
Well, full disclosure, I've done a couple of your interviews, and I wouldn't miss it. So great. Now, let's get right on. I'm going to ask you real quick. So you got your finger on the pulse. What's going on in Oakland County?
Well, there are a lot of interesting topics happening. Business is sort of starting to come back from the pandemic, and people are trying to figure out, the challenges that we're facing with things like, housing and development, and what are we doing to, keep our communities thriving. So I've been really interested in some of the governmental solutions to those things, like how DDAs are doing, the patio zones, and how those are transferring into the post-pandemic world, and housing issues such as short-term rental properties and accessory dwelling units, and finding solutions for housing issues, and what do we do in communities that are built out when there are housing shortages, without also, drastically changing communities. These are probably the biggest debates that I've been following over the past couple of months.
Well, you talk about DDAs. What's a DDA?
So a DDA is a Downtown Development Authority, and across Oakland County, there are 25 what are called Main Street organizations. And a DDA is just one of the mechanisms for funding a downtown. So if you think about downtown Ferndale or downtown Birmingham or downtown Holly, all these different places, where we imagine a sense of people coming together, and, the businesses in the community and events and those kinds of things. That all happens usually because there's an organization that's behind the scenes making it happen. And that's anything from most people think of the events, the parades and festivals and stuff, but they are actually part of design committees that help to make sure businesses, look a certain way and fit in with the atmosphere, or development issues such as how do we solve parking problems, and how do we solve, mixed use, repurposing of older buildings. If something is, an older building that's obsolete, what do we do with that? And having an organization like a DDA, which is, the Downtown Development Authority, or like in Pontiac, I think you have a principal shopping district. There's also corridor improvement authorities. They're just different ways that the state allows communities to capture tax revenue and reinvest it in making those communities great. And you can see examples of that all throughout Oakland County.
The acronym I liked best was Corridor Improvement Authority, because when you're voting money for the CIA, that was always fun. So basically, what a DDA or the CIA or principal shopping district is becomes a local sort of governmental unit, an authority that has taxing power and can tax, and then do what the authority is meant there to do. Is that correct?
Yeah, it does. It's the thing that is a little bit unique about it is that it doesn't raise taxes. What they do is, as if you establish a DDA or any of these other organizations, as property values go up, they're able to capture money that would normally go to, like Oakland County or Oakland Community College, the zoo, different tax funding, agencies. They intercept a percentage of that money to reinvest in the communities. So, like, one of the things that's been interesting recently is in downtown Lake Orion, there are a group of residents who are, in general, opposed, to taxation, and they want to disband the DDA. So they've actually started a petition that would remove them, from having any authority in the area. And it would take the money that is currently going to that organization and send it back out to the different other governing agencies. So about 400,000 of it would stay local to the Lake Orion Village, and then another 400,000 would leave the community. And then they wouldn't have, this. There's there's a director and there's a board and there's a whole bunch of volunteers and committees and all these things that go along with an organization, to help the community. But in this case, they wanted to just get rid of that. And it looks like that's not, like, they're not going to be able to get enough signatures for that. But it's very, very rare for communities to, get rid of an organization like that once they have it. Just because of all the things that they do manage in keeping a downtown, vibrant and welcoming for businesses and residents. So that's been interesting.
Well, you used a great term, intercept tax revenue. It's not that we raise taxes on another level to give taxes to that level of government. Or it's called tax capture. Tax interception is probably even better. Well done, good job. Is that but it does leave the pot a little bit emptier for the other people, including the local government, and that could be is that one of the drivers behind Lake Orion's disenchantment?
Yeah, so that is one of the issues that they brought up. But the challenge is, so if you're getting $400,000 going back to the village, they've done all the calculations on that. And once you take all the things that the DDA pays for, that they would still have to pay for as the village, you're only actually left with a gain of $172,000 to the village, which, when you're talking local government, numbers, to disband this organization for a gain of 172,000, you're not going to. There's not a whole lot of bang for your buck that you can do with that level of money, at a municipal level. But that's how the math works out. So, while they would get 400 back, it ends up not being as great of like a windfall as they would expect it to be.
Yeah, another thing, in my first go around on the Oakland Board of Commissioners, and this is during the Patterson years, and they were extremely, very, very determined not to approve or renew any DDA, any tax capture authority that did not have a sunset date. And that was an explicit predication for approval or not approval, was that they can't go on forever. They need to be reevaluated. Is that an issue with Lake Orion as well?
No, I think that across the state, I researched where else had ended their DDAs or similar organizations, and I was only able to find 2 examples where cities were like, oh, this is working, but let's end it. Because if something's working well for your community, and it attracts additional money, it's not just the tax money that comes in, it's the ability to attract grants and to manage grants into your community, the ability, to work in like collaborative ways. So like with Main Street, Oakland County, all of those communities, pay a little bit of a membership fee to be part of this organization, but they get all that extra knowledge and technical assistance, historical assistance, graphics. There's a lot of things that come to them as part of being part of these organizations. So across the state, there's only been 2 that I've been able to find. One is Pontiac, which had their DDA organization taken away under emergency financial management. So they have brought back like a nonprofit to sort of try and do that, but there's no tax capture, nothing that they have to work with to, make to bring Pontiac back to, being vibrant. And then the other one was a city up north called Buchanan. And they sort of had that same, perspective of, we should not have, minimize what we're doing with taxes and get rid of the DDA. They did in 2021, and they've had so many problems and economic challenges from getting rid of the organization that they're actually working now to bring it back and essentially start over with that organization, because the loss was, an obvious thing. So in my story, it even says, like, we shot ourselves in the foot by doing that, was what the city manager up there said. It's one of those things that just brings, added value beyond just the dollars that are, invested in it. So most communities aren't interested in getting rid of them.
Well, Birmingham has the principal shopping district, which is this same thing, and it's been very, very successful. And come on down to Birmingham anytime if you. And yes, parking may be an issue at some points, but that's a problem with success. And yes, we have torn up Brown Street to rebuild it. The damn roads have to be fixed somehow. And the downtown, it's been a real success, and it can be. So, do you see DDAs or PSDs or CIAs? Are they on the upswing or decline, do you think?
So I don't know that they're, well, actually I can answer that. I was going to say that I don't think that I think they're sort of developed out, but in reality, Main Street Oakland County is growing. Even in Pontiac, they've got the Main Street organization for downtown. There's actually a group of residents who are working on a corridor improvement authority, I believe, for Huron Street in Pontiac, which is another strip that has, traditionally has had a lot of businesses on it, but certainly could use some, businesses coming in and filling vacancies and stuff. So there is a group there that's working to do that. So we may not see any more, like super planned out downtowns, but getting other corridor improvement authorities to use the same model has been really successful. And actually, I'll go back to Orion. I'll give you two examples, Orion and Madison Heights. So in Orion Township, on the border with Auburn Hills, they had one of their major roads become a corridor improvement authority. And it's not, a visual downtown like you would think of Lake Orion, but it's still a way that all of the business revenue that's happening there can be spent on things that make the area better, like road improvements and, pocket parks. And signage and just different amenities to make that a more attractive place for businesses to go in and for people to feel comfortable, walking through and using the areas and having a mix of green space and businesses. All of that gets done because there's a board that is intentionally making decisions about what's going to happen along that stretch, as opposed to here's a vacant property, let's build whatever there. When you organize it that way and use that money as an investment, you get to decide how that road looks, 5, 10, 20 years into the future. So it's a very intentional thing. And like I say, it doesn't raise the taxes for people. It just means that, less of that improvement is going to like the county and those other things. And Madison Heights is another one that they're actually trying to build a downtown and make it, it won't be a historic downtown, like Holly or Highlands is, but they're using the I want to say it's the 11 Mile and John R area as a development area, and trying to make more plans for mixed use developments with green space where like the Save a Lot used to be, and to build that up in a way that it feels like a walkable, shoppable kind of downtown, as opposed to like, the strip malls that they're sort of, a lot of the community is.
Yeah, just ribbon towns. Yeah, well, are you talking about downtown Clawson, which has been very successful, I think. I love downtown Clawson. We can talk about this all day, and we're going to have to take a break, unfortunately, but we'll come right back with Crystal Proxmire, editor-publisher of the Oakland County Times. We're talking about downtowns, and we might see about what's coming to yours. Chuck Moss, don't go away. We'll be right back here on Eye on Oakland. Welcome back to Eye on Oakland. I'm Chuck Moss and your host. Let's get right back into it with Crystal Proxmire, editor-publisher of the Oakland County Times. We're talking about downtown development authorities, corridor improvement authorities, whatever the authorities are that help build downtown. And I know they've been successful in Birmingham. They've been great here. Let's shift gears, though. We're still talking about towns. Accessory dwelling units. What are those?
So accessory dwelling units are if you have a home and you've got space on your property, there in most communities you can add on an apartment either like above your garage or attached to your garage or a little building in the back of the building to serve as like a little granny house or whatever they call them. It's ways that people who own property can add housing units to the property that they already own. And this is sort of coming up lately because we definitely do have a housing shortage all throughout Oakland County, and pretty much everybody has housing shortages right now because we've got a lot of people that are living single these days, and we've got a lot of older adults who don't necessarily want to live in their big giant house by themselves as they age, and they need places to go. So between that and the increase in rent costs because of the availability of apartments, it's something that a lot of communities are looking at. And so this came on my radar about a week ago. Oakland County hosted a planners gathering for all of the development professionals in communities to talk about what cities have these types of ordinances to encourage these kind of buildings, and what people are what problems they're having, what challenges, and what things that you can write into the ordinances to like make them work out okay. And I think that's been just such a fascinating development. Between those and the short-term rentals is another reason I would say that this is coming up, because there are so many homes that are now being turned into like Airbnbs, where people are just renting out their homes for short terms instead of long-term renters. So we've got all of these different, reasons why housing, is an issue. So ADUs are kind of one of the solutions that communities are throwing around right now.
Well, I know in Birmingham, the new 2040 plan has mentioned them, and it's quite controversial. I'll just say that, it can be seen as an end run around the single family zoning. You comment on that? Or?
Yeah, that's definitely something that people are concerned about. So what they did in this presentation, this most recent presentation, they brought in people from Traverse City and Ann Arbor who, they're whenever there are housing issues, they're sort of on the forefront because, Traverse City is this tourist town, and, you're having, especially with short-term rentals, people, no longer having places for your workers to live. So, and they get such an influx of people that they're dealing with housing. And then Ann Arbor is a college town. So they both have their housing issues for different reasons. And they've had their ADU ordinances a lot longer, and they've been more, aggressive about promoting them. But the biggest pushback is from people who don't want ADUs. They don't want them in their neighbor's backyard. They don't want more density. They don't want the fears that people have of, are you going to have college kids living in the backyard that's right behind your backyard, in Ann Arbor? Or, what's going to happen in like Traverse City? Are these going to be used for, parties on the weekends? Is that just going to increase the noise and the traffic in the neighborhoods? So there are definitely a lot of questions. And of course, the pushback has been, from neighbors that don't want them. But what they've also found is that, how can a city like Traverse City or Ann Arbor that's already built out accommodate, the workers that need to come in and work there? So they've had ordinances to go around like some of the concerns, like the idea that the units are going to be used as rentals or like for student rentals. The communities have said that the owner must live on site. So if it's you in your main house and your, mother-in-law in the back house or whatever, one of those two properties has to be occupied by the owner, to make sure that there aren't, parties getting out of hand or things like that. So yeah, I think that that's probably like the main issue is, we don't want them here, which happens pretty much anytime people try to add housing, into residential communities, whether it's apartments or, is your solution going to be to add, 10 apartments on, one property instead of a house? Or is your solution going to be to allow houses to add accessory dwelling units so that you don't have to necessarily go to, big apartment buildings to get the space that people need in order to, live in your community? So it's one of those things that, and I love those issues that are like hard on both sides, because it isn't like this is a clear solution to everything, because there's always, things are always hard when you have to make tough choices.
I know in Birmingham, in '96, when we were doing the 2016 plan, we approved big garages, carriage houses. That was my ordinance, by the way. And, so I was very proud of it. But we went to great pains to say these are not occupancy. These are not dwelling units. And we built one, which is only fair. We use it for my wife's studio, but there's a bathroom, but there's no shower. There's no, you couldn't live there. You couldn't make that a dwelling unit. And that was extremely important to put in there, that you can build a carriage house and you can do all kinds of stuff with it, but you can't use it for as another dwelling unit. And we certainly couldn't use it for rental. I mean, that was like a huge no-no, because the issue right now, and this is in Birmingham as well, is densification. Is there kind of an end run to, some will say subverting, some will say something else, the single family dwelling issue?
Yeah, and that's definitely the main, topic that comes up when people start discussing, these types of properties.
Yeah, so I know there's an election in Birmingham coming up, and I got no dogs in that fight at all. Not even my own. Myself as a dog, so that's good. Question is, for the future for Oakland County, is this going to be something every community is going to want to look at?
So, and that's what they were that's what Oakland County right now is sort of trying to feel out. Is they're putting feelers out there to see, are there communities that are working on this? I know in Ferndale it's been sort of casually discussed, but I don't know if they're looking at it, from a policy perspective of encouraging this. But it definitely comes up, in the forums and things like that, because, there are a lot of times where you might want to have your own family members, living in an accessory unit on your property. Whether it's your elderly, parent that needs a place to live, or your young, college age kids or whatever that don't have, like rental apartments are very hard to come by right now. So having the ability to add those types of things onto your home is attractive to people in those types of situations. I think people assume that they're gonna, end up being like rented out, but people figuring out what to do with their families is also a very real, challenge for people. It's also expensive. So even in communities like Traverse City and Ann Arbor that are really encouraging people to do this, they're not finding like massive numbers of people just adding onto their houses. Up in Traverse City, there are people. I forgot to write down the number. I think they've had like 60 of them over the past like 10 years since they've been really, pushing this. And it's just because the cost is really high. So it isn't necessarily that if a community approves these, they're going to get, thousands of them popping up. It was like $350,000 to add on an apartment to a garage in Traverse City. So you're just not seeing a ton of them. And then you do get into those regulations, like you said, you've got a bathroom out in your garage, but to add, a functioning kitchen and the functioning plumbing that you would need for someone to live there, that's a big expense. But what they're also finding in both of those communities are people that sort of did those things, makeshift apartments, without getting permits for them. So that's also kind of been a problem, because you're getting like half done kinds of, like if you sold your house, somebody could, rent that room to somebody because there's a bathroom in it, it wouldn't be a fully functioning house for them, but they would try to make it be, just because that's a place, with a roof and, a toilet in it. So that's another issue that they're sort of, looking at, is how do we get the ones that are already existing, into compliance and inspected and safe and all of those things.
Well, as someone who lived in the student ghetto in East Lansing in the 1970s, I can certainly understand why nobody would want me as a neighbor. And as far as a mother-in-law suite or mother's suite, my mother already still lives in her house, and she didn't let us party when we even lived there. So she's doing fine. She's still independent. No worries there. But the cost of housing is an issue, but my understanding of Ferndale is that Ferndale is such a smashing success that you have the people that would normally have gone to Ferndale have all gone to Hazel Park, and Hazel Park has had its renaissance now, and Hazel Park is doing really well. Similarly, Royal Oak, everything went out to Clawson and Berkeley. And these communities are all having their own golden age. So I can't, I don't know what to say. I do know Birmingham, if you anything that smacks of densification is going to have a fight, particularly this fall.
Yeah, and that's true in a lot of communities, and that's whether it's adding into the properties or adding in apartments. There's always resistance everywhere for them. But the challenge is that Ferndale is a great example. Ferndale, you could easily find a place to live for under $1,000 a month in Ferndale before the pandemic. Now, there are apartments going for $2,000, $3,000 a month that were previously rented for like under $1,000. So the challenge really is, it's great that, more people are moving in and property values are going up, but what happens to the people that you need in your communities to work at the restaurants, or to teach at the schools, or just the physical workforce that you need to maintain a community? And I would guess that in Birmingham there are probably a lot of people that come from other cities to do those types of jobs, and and that continues to happen. But at what point, how do we solve that problem? So like in Traverse City, like they just can't get workers. And the teachers that are teaching in Traverse City are living in Cadillac and driving to Traverse City because there's just literally nowhere that anybody that works there can afford to live. And
Cadillac's a long way away.
Do we deal with that? Yeah. Oh, it's really bad up there. And that's why they're always the forefront of these types of discussions.
Well, these are important issues, and they're obviously coming to your community. Unfortunately, we're going to have to call it quits here. I appreciate somebody's got your fingers on the pulse on that. Lord knows we don't have mainstream media anymore that covers these things. And Oakland County Times will put it up on the screen, and go there if you want to see what's really going on and some in-depth discussion on Oakland County issues. Well, thank you, Crystal Proxmire, who is the editor and publisher, the William Randolph Hearst of Oakland County Times. I'm Chuck Moss, ditto for Eye on Oakland, and thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you.